Good morning, everybody. I'm really honored to be here, and I hope I can contribute to the debate and the discussion. I suppose I'm bringing a bit more the field level and practical perspective to the debate. And so I will mainly discuss our experience from the Linking Preparedness, Response and Resilience Project, in short LPRR. It's a DFID-funded, it's a consortium project led by ActionAid. It's quite a large consortium. It's made by ActionAid, Concern, HelpAge, King's College London, MuslimAid, Oxfam, Safer World, and World Vision. I still need to read them after 3 years. And it started in 2015 and it lasted, will last till March 2018. I would like to mention at this stage that most of the organizations are multi-mandated organizations, and none of them are purely humanitarian. And in particular, I would like to stress that ActionAid is a partnership-based organization. So in terms of localization, we're already delivering all our responses to local partners. This is the assumption. So what was the project aiming to do? The scope was really to look at the practicalities, so developing practical tools for increasing preparedness and capacity for both conflict settings and response. And in particular, today I will speak about the response part. How we want to do it? It's basically, we had the three main approaches. So one is to develop new tools. Sorry, I always forget the mic. To develop new tools and test them in practice. Our big assumption is that we want to do it collaboratively. We realize that we cannot do it by ourselves. In terms of resilient thinking, we need to work together with other agencies. So everything needs to be done collaboratively. And as well as, thanks to the role of King's College, we were looking at learning for improving practices. So we took an action learning research approach to the whole project. So what was the scope of the study? There's quite a lot in terms of academia and policy level in how to link humanitarian response to long-term resilience. However, it's lacking a bit of practicalities. How does it look like in practice? So we worked together with King's College London to try to answer the question how humanitarian response can build or not undermine community resilience. And they started from the debate on linking relief, development, linking relief, recovery debate. And coming from there, they move on and looked at specifically at the work of Joanna McRae from DFID, where she was arguing that actually the resilience approach could help in bridging at that time, the humanitarian development divide. So how the project actually contributed to this debate? They conducted a very large literature review, and they identified two main gaps in the literature review. The first one was a lack of knowledge that focused on asking crisis survivors and first responders their recommendation. So the sector never asked our final client how we should work. For me, it was quite surprising. The second one was a lack of systematic implementation and evaluation of practical recommendation. So the research mainly focused on these two gaps. Thanks to working in a large consortium and with this collaboration principle, these are the 8 case studies that were studied. Sorry, you cannot see them from there properly. But basically, we had the opportunity to study different contexts, different type of hazard, both conflict and natural hazard, as well as different operational model. So trying to encapture a bit everything. And wait, okay. So the first finding, we asked survivors from all these 8 case studies coming from 7 different countries, what was their perception of resilience? So what they feel resilience will look like. And Of course, resilience looked differently in every different place because you know it very well, it's very context specific. However, out of the 7, we just lack DRC because we lack that specific data. For them, for crisis survival, resilience means independence and support when needed. In particular, a stakeholder and interviewed define it as the resilience means having the skills and capacity to look after yourself whilst knowing how and where to ask for support where needed. If you look at it, I don't know how much you know about the resilient literature, but it's quite developmental in terms of definition. And when they speak about independence, they don't speak about independence by the government. This was the first reaction. Actually, they speak about independence from external actor, from us, NGOs, or different actors coming in. They want to be independent and knowing where to find support when needed. Please keep this definition in mind. Okay, so the findings of the study. Across all the case studies, across all the different contexts, these are the 6 main common recommendations. I like to call them no regrets because they seem like if you do them, you won't go wrong in terms of building or not undermining community resilience. So the first one is to allow the community to run or co-run the response. They really shouted. They don't want to be consulted. They want to run it. They want to do it. The second one is to coordinate intervention and work with the government, also in DRC and Colombia, conflict-affected areas, meaning not working hand in hand, but involve them, advocate them, like they need to be part of the whole process. The third one is to support community cohesion and establish effective two-way communication. And the fourth one, they're not in order of priority, they're just in. The fourth one is to address underlying causes of vulnerability through protection and preparedness at different stages, psychosocial support, and livelihood, income generation, cash, and saving. So if you look at them, they're not particularly surprising. We knew them. But the recipe, the 6 of them all together, are something different, something new. And as you can see, the scope was to find something practical. And they speak to practice, but they're still quite policy level. And specifically, when we run them through the consortium members, they were saying, yeah, great, but how you do that in a new emergency? There's so much to be set in place beforehand, how we can do it. So they say, okay, you did a good job, now let's design a new program based on this one from zero. But, so we could be at ease, okay, job done. But then the project actually committed to test in practice. And as they're all new, they're not new in terms of approach. We say like, wait a second. Within the sector, there are some organizations that are already quite strong in all of the 6 of them. So why don't we contact them and try to work together again, in the collaborative approach. And we identified these 3, one, we knew it already, is us. But 3 other main organizations. The first one, I'm not sure if you're familiar, it's called Local to Global Protection, and they're testing a survival-led response. They've been working for 10 years, and they showed that community members, survivors, can run a response. The second one is the Church of Sweden. They're, sorry, here is cutting. But it's basically their strength is community-based psychosocial support. We thought that we could add inclusion, that's our strength. And then Safer World, which is a community security organization who can contribute with conflict sensitivity. So the idea was, why don't we try and create a blended approach for a new emergency from zero? And we took it even forward. We say, why don't we try to do one package of 1 week blending everything? Just experimental. We were lucky to have a donor that allowed us full flexibility to experiment. It's a learning project, so let's push the limit. So, as the findings strongly speak to localization, we had to define some minimum benchmark. What is localization for us with these new principles? So, around the, can you see them? Okay. because I cannot see it from here. I read it. So, sorry. So the first one was so recognizing that crisis-affected communities are always the first responders. We need to recognize that. We need to acknowledge that. And the second one is that we need to recognize that there are some benefits in plugging in that energy of the first responders. The third benchmark was to be proactive in supporting innovation through letting go, looking for a holistic approach. The third one is willingness to put money, give microgrants directly in the hands of the survivors. The next one was to recognize that external control is not necessarily the most effective means of promoting the crucial issues of inclusion, accountability, do no harm, especially in emergency contexts. I know this could be, but yeah, we put it there. That was our assumption. Then that the coordination system should become more accessible to local actors. Some easy one. And then important was the ability to listen, the readiness to listen to communities' requests for a more holistic aid system. And then also to reconsider the nature of partnership. Again, we open up everything. Let's try. It was really fun. Okay, so we choose to run this new blended approach in Myanmar, Rakhine, and Kayin and Rakhine. In KBC, Dear Myanmar, MRF, and BBS are our partners in Myanmar, and then also in Marsabit, Mararal, and Isiolo in North Kenya during the current drought. With partners from ActionAid and CAFOD, yes, which is PASIDA, Mionet, SIFA, Caritas, Marsabit, Mararal, and Isiolo. The Kenya pilot just ended 2 weeks ago, the rollout at least. So, what we wanted to do, we wanted to, now this looks funny, we wanted to co-design a workshop. So again, with the localization agenda in mind and the benchmark, we thought we had to do something different. So we need to acknowledge that partners have capacity. So we had to really re-educate ourselves in terms of language. We cannot speak about training. It's too top-down. So now we just speak about co-design workshops, which is very long, but that takes to the point. Going back to facilitation, not training, not sitting and teaching, but really just facilitating, bringing out things. Listen and do not impose conceived ideas. So again, just working together, letting go, be ready to be challenged, and recognizing that each context is different and requires tailored approach. So the idea was to co-design the methodology, so from the 6, try to transform in something practical, as well as build capacity of the participant. Okay, sorry, comes out weird. So what was the outcome? So the 6, if you have more or less in mind the 6, this is how they look like after you give them to local partners. This is 10 local partners in 3 different locations working together. They all came out for more or less something similar. So, can you read a little bit from there? It's quite tiny, huh? Okay, let me. If I can't hear, can you still hear me? Okay, so we do have. So these are 8 building blocks or steps. Some are speaking strongly to the humanitarian bits, and some are speaking strongly to the development field, and one on the security one. So if there's one block which is the pulp, which is basically a model for doing the assessment where community volunteers conduct the assessment. There's a delivery of microgrants, so giving small grants of the order of $500 to $1,000 to pop-up groups. Totally registered, cluster of families getting together on an idea. So these are clearly humanitarian. Then we have institutional change, addressing root causes, coordination, alliances, which are more definitely, as you were mentioning, in the realm of development. And then conflict sensitivity. And at the center, what was being put by the local partner was the community well-being in terms of being cohesive, organized, and resilient. Okay, I'll leave that for a second. Now, it's exactly the sixth finding of the research, but just translating something definitely more practical and tangible that can be done during our response. What were the strengths of the approach from our local partners? The first one is the psychosocial and working with the government. When we start speaking about psychosocial support, everyone says, yes, it's obvious, everywhere, not only in conflict setting, also in natural disaster. Survivors are stressed, they're traumatized. We need to do that. And that's why community-based approaches are way much better than external intervention and trauma healing, which is a totally different setting. But then they also recognize working with the government. Yes, why not? In Kenya, they were saying we need to align our plans with government plans. In Myanmar, they say, no, we need to involve them in advocating and try to have a conversation around it. Because what the message that we are telling us is like long-term vulnerability reduction, you have to basically help the government to build their capacity to protect the well-being of their citizens. That's exactly how they framed it. The second one, the second strength of the approach from their perspective was the humanitarian response centered around well-being. So strongly recognizing that we need to work on the community well-being, aligning the social fabric and supporting community togetherness. They were very excited to move from basic need to something a bit more wider, just not only material things. The third one, the third strength, was livelihoods. They said, yes, absolutely, livelihood from day one. We need to start thinking livelihood from day one. Because it allows to avoid aid dependency. It seems that aid dependency has been disappeared by the debate, but it's still quite heavy and strong. So livelihood from the very, very beginning. But then they say, okay, but what's the challenges? No, okay, you will be implementing because each of them will have a small grant of around $10,000 to start playing with it. The idea is to leverage more funding if we're good. So the first one, the security of partners. With this model, we are basically outsourcing the risk right down to our partners, in a fragile setting, in conflict setting, and but also in normal setting. They will be the face. And there's no solution, but I think we need to acknowledge that and try to address it together. The second one, they said, community capacity. They said, yeah, maybe they're not so strong, and so how can we solve it? They said, like, we can do it. Now we can be mentor of the community pop-up groups and help them with ideas. Now that's our role. It was quite positive. Then they said, another critical point will be getting the right people. If you're using volunteer and pop-up groups, how do you avoid doing no harm? Doing no harm. Okay, you got me. In terms of grant misuse, but also starting internal conflict. How we do that. And they developed some checklists during the workshop, during the 6 days, on how to minimize those risks. And finally, community volunteers. You need to plug in existing groups or structure to start working with them. They need to be the lead in this process. But the biggest worry for them, the biggest, in all three sites, was like, they literally say, but do they know in London that you're doing this? No? Are we allowed? That was their biggest fear. Because they were really, really worried. They'd say, because, if we're doing this type of approach, the whole system needs to be reframed, rethought. Are you sure we can do it? I said, yeah, try, go ahead, and let's see how it goes. But it was quite funny. Anyway, to conclude, I will close with a quote, which is, community members are not like goats. They need more than food and water to survive. Thank you very much.